Council. I'd like to call this committee of the whole meeting of May 12th, 2022 to order. And just before we start, for the record, we have one member of the public in chambers, Mr. Stuart Andrews. I'd like to call for adoption of the agenda. Someone want to make that motion? Councillor Gillette, seconded by Councillor Palmer. All in favor? Motion's carried. Adoption of the minutes of April 14th, Committee of the Whole. Someone make that motion? Councillor Palmer, seconded by Councillor Gillette. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you, Councillor Rind. Any business arising from those minutes? Seeing none, I will move on to staff reports, the official community plan engagement summary. So I know we have some focus, OCP focus members here. Mr. Simon, you'll start off and then we'll go into Ms. Learned and the focus group. Is that correct?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, that is correct. My only role today, really, if you guys have some questions, I'm happy to help answer. But the main focus today is to hear from Ms. Learned, who has been instrumental in helping the city with facilitating this engagement process, and then very importantly, listening to the focus group members and getting council the opportunity to ask questions about, you know, the good and the bad and some of the challenges of going through the process so that we can continue to improve on our public engagement as we go forward. So with that, I will pass it over to Ms. Learned, who has a really brief presentation for council and will introduce the focus group members that we're lucky enough that they've taken their time out today to be with us for committee of the whole. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Simon. Ms. Learned.
Thank you, Your Worship. Hello, Council. Great to see you today. I'm just working to share my screen. And Paul, I may need you to share yours because it's not working for me on my end here today.
No problem.
Always have plan B.
There we go. Can you see everything, Your Worship?
Yes, we can. Thank you, Mr. Simon.
Thank you, Paul. So as Paul mentioned, we're here today just to give you a very brief overview and a bit of, I guess it's somewhat of a reminder of the process that we've gone through to develop the draft official community plan that was recently provided to the public for their review and feedback. So we'll just go to the next slide. Sorry, the next one, Paul. Thanks. I'm going to give a very brief overview of the process, and really the focus of today's portion is to meet some of your fellow citizens that dedicated their time and commitment and passion to helping develop the draft OCP. I hope that this graphic is somewhat familiar to you. It's been used on the Talk Revelstoke sites and a lot of the communications information that has been provided to the public and to stakeholder groups in terms of the process. We did start way back at the end of 2019 when we did a vision check-in and looked at community priorities. And then we went through a number of steps to get from the vision to the draft official community plan that you have today. There were a number of touch points with the general public, and then there were many focused discussions and conversations with what we're calling the focus group. And we've introduced the focus group members to you before in terms of who was on that committee and what their role and responsibility was in terms of helping guide the process and help us progress with engagement and outreach throughout the process. Next slide, Paul. So as I said, the focus really is to hear from the focus group members that were able to attend today. On this slide, you'll see the 24 individuals that have been involved as members of the focus group. We have 20 different organizations or networks represented with these members, and they participated in at least 15 meetings throughout the time that we've been developing the process. And we've had many great discussions, great outreach, and work done to create the draft OCP. One of the big important things that was done was recruitment to craft some policy teams, which we'll show you in the next slide. And so we had 33 citizens commit their time and effort on different theme areas of the official community plan and related goal areas. And so their role was to really help start crafting the policy that you see in the OCP today. So the policy came from community members. It came from a technical review and best practices of what other communities are doing, of what Revelstoke had done in the past, and what would continue to move forward based on the goals and the themes stated. And these members of the community spent close to 400 hours putting time into helping craft the initial draft of the policies. And so on the next slide, you'll see engagement by the numbers. And if you had a chance to come out to our public sessions earlier this month, you would have seen an earlier version of this, and we've just recently updated it to show you with that most recent engagement, the total numbers to date that we've been able to track and in some cases estimate in terms of the involvement of the community in the process and the involvement of the focus group members and the policy team as well. So a substantial amount of time has been put in. We've got over 1,100 volunteer hours committed to the project from volunteers in the community. And we've had outreach to residents through different channels, especially Talk Revelstoke, traditional media channels, things like that. And then direct engagement that we've tracked through the general public as well. So I'm going to end just the quick overview of the process, and I want to hand it over to the focus group members. And I'd like to start with one of the co-chairs, Jane McNabb. She was co-chair with Sheena Wells on the focus group. And what we've asked today of the focus group members is they introduce themselves, the organization or the network that they represented as part of the focus group. And then just talk to you a little bit about the process, some things that could be improved and some things that worked well and their perspective on it. So Jane, if you'd please go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jane McNabb, and I was lucky enough to co-chair the focus group, working with Sheena Wells. And that was an interesting partnership because Sheena is the same age as my own children and went through school with them. So it shows the diversity of people willing to be involved in the focus group. I was asked to be there because I'm a senior. I was not representing the Seniors Association, but just seniors in general. I am also a coordinator for the Community Volunteer Income Tax Program. We do income tax for low-income people. So I'm very in touch with a lot of seniors who are low income. I was spent many years on the Advisory Planning Committee, so I've been through OCP processes. And I was initially concerned or curious how COVID was going to impact this whole process and how we were going to get input from people. And I think the many processes, which Kelly has just outlined, allowed far more people to have meaningful input than has happened in the past. I felt it was a great process. I learned a lot from the huge variety of people on the focus group and from all the presentations that we received. I was also involved with the policy group, and we had amazing discussions. There were 8 people in our group, 4 men, 4 women, which was just random. They were ranging in age from 30 to 75. They'd been in town from anywhere from 4 years to 40 years. And it was a really diverse background of people. So I was impressed with the enthusiasm, the interest, and the creative ways people had of looking at things. So I felt this process actually went really well. A few hiccups along the way, which is natural for a new process, but I think it was a very, very positive experience. So.
Thank you, Jane. I'm going to ask Roberta and Cindy to provide your perspective.
Hey, thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Roberta Bobicki, and I was on this focus group first and foremost, probably because I'm chair of the Economic Development Commission. But I also spent 40 years of my life with Revelstoke Credit Union, which is an organization that's extremely involved and supportive of the community. And I'm very passionate about Revelstoke. I graduated here and have always kept involved in things that are happening in the community. I just for sure want to see us moving forward in the positive way that we have over the years. My perspective of this whole process was, once we got our traction, it was exceptional, and things that needed to be massaged were, some things, some of the process was changed while we were on the ground running, and everybody was very open and receptive to that. At the onset, I was a little confused from July 2020 till January, when really, without knowing anything about what we were going to do, and suddenly we were knee deep in the community energy, the SEEP, I can't remember what it all stands for. So it kind of, I was very confused at the beginning. I didn't prefer any of that time from July till January. Let's just put it that way. Not that I'm not concerned about those issues. I absolutely am. But I think if that's going to be incorporated in this process, it should be done differently, for sure. Anyway, I just want to speak volumes about the quality of the people, first of all, in the focus group, and then these policy teams. We always want to have more input directly from the public, but as we know, lots of people are apathetic and then don't say their piece. We really wanted to get that word out that you will be heard. We are listening. And I think we did that. I think we did that fairly well, looking at the response that we actually did in fact get. Anyway, I think the process is great. I think it's something that other communities might even look to because of the success of it. And I absolutely cannot say enough positive things about Miss Learned and Mr. Simon, and with the support of Lisa. It's just been exceptional working for them, and how they listen and how receptive they were to feedback and open and candid discussions. There was nothing that was thrown back to us like, are you kidding? It was all given such careful thought. And so all of that put together, I think this has just been an exceptional process. I've been waiting 10 years to get this OCP updated. I'm thankful that it's done before I kick the bucket. And I'm really, really positive and really love the document that's been put together. So thank you.
Thanks, Roberta. Cindy Pierce.
Hi. Hello, Council, City staff, Ms. Learned, and my fellow OCP focus group members. I'm Cindy Pearson. I'm on the focus group as a member of the public at large. I think I'm there in large part because as a freelance consultant here in Revelstoke, over my almost 30 years of living here, I've been honored to complete several planning initiatives for the city and for other community organizations in the past. In these COVID times, I haven't been out much, so not much of a public at large at this time, but know the community a bit from these past processes. In my view, this has really been an exceptional process in terms of staff commitment, in terms of project management through some really difficult spots, in terms of the technical background information that was compiled and communicated to us in ways that we could understand, which means a lot. And also the community engagement, which Ms. Learned has outlined. I do hope the city will follow this kind of process for other community plans. I really agree with Jane that the array of public engagement processes allowed for more input than in past processes, and that includes ones that I have led. And I echo Roberta's credits for Mr. Paul and Ms. Learned for genuinely hearing us, even the just-in-time emails that I would send at odd hours, and for finding innovative solutions that really fit in our very special historical and resort community. I think we all would agree that more time could have been spent on the substantive work of drafting the text. But This constrained timeline was understandable given the unfortunate disruptions that we experienced. And I wasn't able to be part of any of the policy groups, but I don't hear from the folks who did participate that there was a big compromise with that. I really hope that council will accept this work, this exceptional work by staff and citizens, and move quickly to approval and move on to implement it, and not be tempted to unnecessarily meddle with it, given the scope and scale and the solid background that it's based on. Thank you for the opportunity to participate and also to share my views today.
Thank you, Cindy. Appreciate it.
Carol, and then we'll wrap up with Connie.
Thanks, everyone. I came to the process a little bit late, Arts Revelstoke, just from a capacity perspective. So I joined in this sort of larger focus group conversations last fall, but having been a long-term person in the community and being involved with previous public processes, it was great to jump in with both feet. I was there to represent Arts Revelstoke and also I think the larger cultural community, just being a long time volunteer and being involved with starting up our gallery, previous festivals, that sort of thing. I also chaired the policy committee on vibrant culture and heritage. And I have to say my committee members, it wasn't a large committee, but between Kathy English and Jan Morehouse, solidly representing the heritage sector. Anita Halawas, who many of you know, Flying Arrow, so, you know, fully rooted in sort of theater, and Robin Goldsmith from tourism, Revelstoke. So, and tourism does have a vested interest in lots of our cultural activities. So even though it was a small committee, it was really exciting because our past OCPs had very little focus or comment with regard to the cultural sector in this community. And it's one that's actually growing and really changing. And so it was very exciting to be able to craft some policy to help the community move forward and understand the impacts of this sector on community life. So all of that was exciting. I think the process, given COVID restrictions, I echo my previous focus group members from the perspective of, because of the restrictions, somehow working harder to reach out and possibly making the process more accessible to people who may perhaps never felt that they really had a voice. So I think that aspect of this process has been really, really important and something certainly to consider moving forward. I think if I had a wish list, it would be, as we move forward and to try and keep this document alive and vital, is you know, perhaps certainly revisiting it at least on an annual basis, but also as we revisit, maybe some focus groups around those larger goal areas, like just small conversations that go on maybe once a year to sort of go, how are we doing in this sector with this goal? I think that could be a way just to keep the conversation lively and current. It was a really great policy or process. And again, being able to feel like you're helping to, one, represent voices, but also craft policy that is hopefully going to be embraced moving forward was, I'm honored to be part of the process and excited as well. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Carol. Connie?
My turn. I'm Connie Brothers, and I represent the Collective Impact, as well as I'm chair of the Advisory Planning Commission, and I'm just a general busybody within city, as everybody knows. And I always have to put my 2 cents in. This process, first of all, I echo everything that everybody has just said. you can see from just the comments that have been made how appreciative people were just to participate in this. And I think that's what I want to basically focus on right now. The process was a real success story, and it was a real example of the power of community engagement and participation. And I don't think I'm wrong in suggesting that those who participated in the process are really grateful to the city planning department with the great collaboration of Kelly and her team for, first of all, undertaking the idea. And as everybody seems to say, this is a relatively new process, a new idea, but just we're appreciative that they undertook the idea, and then they developed the process, which was a very difficult thing to do. And finally, they took it and they followed it through until its successful conclusion. And a lot of time and thought and effort, as well as hearts and souls, went into this project. And I'm preaching to the choir here, obviously, but I think it's good to remind ourselves of certain things sometimes. Community, built on the involvement and participation of our residents, has always been a major strength, and I venture to say the backbone of Revelstoke, and it continues to be so today. It's who we are. It's why we're all so passionate about this community. It's why we live here, and it's why people who come here want to stay here. And this is the point I want to make. It's why the importance of community engagement and participation always needs to be recognized, nurtured, and celebrated. And Paul and Kelly had the foresight to catalog the OCP process, all that's been done, all the time that was put into this. And I hope this process becomes a template for the city, a type of road map, so that for projects needing community engagement and participation in the future. And that's really all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Connie.
Thank you, focus group members, and your worship and council for hearing from our members of this important committee. And I'll just hand it back over to Paul to finish up. And thank you for your time today.
Great, thank you, Ms. Leonard.
Thank you, Your Worship. Not too much more from my end. Myself, Kelly, and the focus group members are here should council have any questions. I do want to take a minute to also commend former Director Wade, who was very instrumental in getting this process going. There's a lot of hard work that was put in from the planning group on all angles, and we were very, very happy to see this to conclusion. And I think that council today is hearing directly from some of the focus group members that are speaking towards some of the successes that we saw with this process. So it was there's a lot of work that was put into it, and we want to make sure that it's acknowledged.
Great, appreciate that, Mr. Simon. Thank you, and I am grateful for all of you and your input and taking this on. I know one of the things when I got elected was let's deal with the OCP, and we're seeing that come to fruition. And I and the rest of council are really pleased. So I have a couple of questions, pretty much of all of you, maybe for your committees. But what do you feel was absolute strength for your committee, and what was the things that we should never do again? And I'm not sure whether each of you have a comment on either of that, but I'd like to ask that first, and then I'm going to go to my co-counsel to see if they have any questions or concerns. So, Cindy, I see your screen lit up, and Jane. So, can we kind of go in the order that you spoke, and then get through everyone, if that's okay? So, Jane.
Sorry, Your Worship, I had a hard time actually hearing your what you'd like us to talk about. If you could.
How's this now? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's better.
The microphone's at the far end of the room, so I just had Councillor Charlotte turn things up for us. So I'm kind of interested from your perspective, what was the good things that you went through, some of the highlights, And what were the things that we should never do again and some of the weak points? And I don't want to belabor that, but I know that you guys worked so hard. I'm just wondering if there's things that you could highlight that would kind of tweak us to remember what we should and shouldn't do as we move forward.
I think the basis of the process went really well. I think creating a focus group with a very diverse group of people, and all of those people have contacts with huge numbers of other people. And I know near the beginning, the group sat down and identified gaps to make sure that the whole of the community was covered. So there was community connections, and there was the food bank, and there was the building industry, and there were environmentalists and culture and seniors, and just making sure there were no gaps. And I think that was a real strength. Another highlight for me was the presentations from some of the other consultants talking about the population growth or the housing needs. So we were given a lot of information. We weren't just working from what we knew. We were working from research that had been done in the community over the years. Those to me were the strengths, and then the diversity of people. And so many people in this town are so knowledgeable and so skillful. And what they brought to the table, most of us at the end of each meeting would go, wow, I learned a lot today. And they get us thinking about stuff. And this was just the people we were working with. Those to me were the highlights. The challenge was COVID, but as someone said, it gave us other ways to reach out. So we used technology a lot more. I emailed so many people and kept reminding them to look at Talk Revelstoke, and Talk Revelstoke was there for people. So all those things that we may not have used as much if we'd been able to meet in person. So I think for some people, the time commitment was a challenge. It's interesting that the people who are here today are all retired or semi-retired, but we had a lot of young working people who came to every meeting. You know, I think the attendance was really high. To have a quorum, I can't remember what it was, but it was a very high percentage, because we felt it shouldn't be half the group talking to council about what people want. It had to be something like 75% was our quorum, just to make sure that we were really representing the community. We spent a lot of time creating the process, and I think it worked really well. I didn't see too many downsides, quite honestly. Yes, there was the whole challenge in the fall with the staffing changes and stuff. That didn't affect us directly because Paul and Kelly kept things going. So, but I'm sure it was a huge stress for them. So, but maybe Cindy has some other things to add.
I think Roberta's next.
Go ahead.
Me?
Yeah, Roberta, I'll get to Roberta. I'll go in the order that you originally did. So Roberta, if you could go, and then I'll go to Cindy, Carol, and Connie. So
Okay,
Roberta.
thanks. I think that the timing was probably a bit of a challenge for us, and walking through a brand new process like this, it would be very difficult to kind of know exactly what each piece, how much time it was going to take. Then of course we had the bumps in the road as well. But having said that, as a focus group member, the way Kelly stick handled that, really, I didn't have a huge sensitivity to that we were off the rails or anything. I think that was very, very well handled. Because of the timing, probably from a personal point of view, I would have liked to have had the time to perhaps reach out more one-on-one to my network. And that didn't really come into play for us. I would say though that the most positive thing out of this for me, and just critical, which Paul has made notes on when this is being reviewed, the selection of those policy teams, in that we didn't have 5,000 people giving us feedback. We started, Jane can probably tell me the numbers, but we started with well over 100 people, like names from the whole focus group were thrown out, like put names of who you think would be suitable. And then Connie and Jane and I sat on a committee and we ran through that list, and we eventually downsized it to 34 people, I think Kelly said, 33. And then Jane and Connie were absolutely stellar in making those contact phone calls to the people and inviting them to sit on the policy teams. So, as I've said, Yellow Pages, if you wanted to select a perfect group for this process, that's what we ended up with. And I think even though we didn't get feedback from 5,000 individuals, I think those 33 people absolutely well represented the community of Revelstoke. And so that was a real positive for me and something I'd like to see carried forward in other plans that get put together.
Great, thank you. Appreciate that. Cindy.
In terms of what don't ever do again, please don't ever let an OCP get this stale. I think that's something that as a community we've learned, that especially a community that's moving and changing as fast as ours is, it needs to have a regular refresh. And there's a last chapter in the document that's really critical. And I believe Paul and Kelly own this one, and it's really vital that council commits themselves to the implementation, the fulsome implementation that includes engagement of the community going forward. That will avoid the problem we had with the 10-year-old stale dated OCP. That's probably the most important for me. Don't ever do again. I'd also like to follow on Paul's words about Marianne Wade's fingerprint. Her thumbprint is firmly on this document. She laid out the process going forward, and she was willing to be innovative as we threw things at her, saying, that's not going to work here. Or did you thought about this? And when she regrettably left us, Paul picked up that model. And I think that's a model the city needs to think about, needs to be committed to, is hearing, honestly and genuinely hearing citizens and responding to them. That really walks the talk of the kind of community that we are at our governance level. I think those for me are the two main things. One other. Jane mentioned the consulting documents. They were outstanding. And I can say that having done those kinds of documents for this city in the past, the consultants that worked on those documents did not do cookie cutter reports for us. They did reports that fit our needs. And those are hard to find. Those kinds of people who are willing to do the kind of report that's needed for a community that's odd like ours is, are hard to find. So I strongly encourage keeping those names close at hand as the city moves forward, and continuing to engage consultants that truly understand and are willing to be flexible, because it made a huge difference to us to have that background, solid background information. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Cindy. Carol.
Thanks. I think the challenges have been talked about a little bit, and that is the tight time frame around some of it is we're aware of it, and I think if we had a little more time, there might have been some more conversations. But nevertheless, I think that the conversations were solid and I think have resulted in a great document. It's also been mentioned, and particularly just by Cindy, but those documents, particularly around population growth and sort of the housing, how much of a deep dive, but how easy they were to understand in terms of complex pictures and over time frames, so that you could think about these things. But yeah, they were really they were easy to take in, even though they covered some really complex issues. And I think just the challenge moving forward, the same thing of keeping this document dynamic and robust and using it as a framework for council decision making, I think, and using it as a path forward. And then that sort of checking back in to make, is there mission drift, or is there a drift away? And I think that's, if we can do that successfully, then I think it will have been a really important process for the community moving forward.
Great, thanks, Carol. Connie.
Yeah, I don't have much more to say. I think the difficulties in the process and the hiccups were really because this has never been done before. And again, I have to give credit to Kelly and the city staff for sort of marshaling us through, because yes, it was hard. It was hard to understand the concept. It was hard to figure out how we get through it and how we make sure that everybody participates, or we have as much participation from the community as possible. So what, you know, and there's the other side to that coin, is that now that we've done it, and now that Paul and Kelly have done the work of cataloging what we did and how we did it, I mean, we have a template now. And as somebody else mentioned, I think Roberta mentioned, I think other communities can look to this and see the success of this, and how it's very valuable for the community to have this kind of input from everybody, and they can use this same type of template. So I hope we use this and we even share it with others going forward. And the only other comment I want to make is that the amount of commitment in this community is just outstanding. You know, the phone calls, Roberta mentioned that Jane and I made some phone calls. It wasn't that difficult because every single person we phoned was honored. Absolutely. And they said, I am honored that you have phoned me and allowed me to participate in this. And the only people who declined, and there was just a couple, is because they just didn't have the time to be able to do it, but they were really sad that they couldn't do it. But this community is such a participating community. You know, we are stronger when we use all of these people, these talented people with great ideas. So let's, hopefully we just go forward with that.
Great, thank you, Connie. Thank you all. I appreciate your comments, and the ability to use the brain trust of the community is an awesome thing. Council, any comments? Councilor Palmer, I'll go to you, far end of the table. Any comments?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor Sulz. Thank you to the committee. Thank you to each one of you for all your hard work. Definitely looking forward to having this done soon. With that, the question I have through to Mr. Simon, timeframe. So when does this come back to council for readings? Does it have to go back to the province? And where can we anticipate possible adoption?
So through your worship to Councillor Palmer, right now we are just working, we're kind of analyzing all the feedback that was received through surveys to the draft OCP. We had overlapped a bunch of the process to still stay on target with that June 14th initial council consideration. So, you know, the legal review's complete, all the internal, external agency referrals complete. So it's just packaging it all up now into the document and, you know, making sure that we're able to communicate any changes that were made from when that draft was released to initial council consideration based on that final technical review, agency review. So June 14th is the target for initial council consideration. You know, if it gets first and second reading by then, we'd be looking at early July for a public hearing. And then again, depending on direction from council and what we're hearing from the community at the formal public hearing, whether or not any changes or tweaks are needed to be made after that, you know, we could be wrapped up, I think, end of July, beginning of August, again, depending on direction from council. And I would have to defer to the corporate officer regarding provincial confirmation of the OCP. I don't believe that's required anymore, but I may be mistaken there.
Ms. Floyd?
Your worship, I don't believe it's a requirement anymore either. It's something that I would have to look into, but the last one didn't require it.
All right.
Thank you.
Councilor Palmer?
That's good. Thanks.
That's good. Councilor Elliott?
It's wonderful that this is coming to fruition. We're at the stage that's I think it was a principal topic in all of our platforms at the start of this term. It's fantastic that it's come and we've got something positive going, or some direction for the future. Just reading here though, it's 10 to 20 year time frame. I know we have to revisit it to keep it relevant. Is it an annual thing, biannual? What's a normal review process period?
Mr. Simon?
Through your worship to Councillor Elliott. So there will be a separate implementation plan that will be part of the initial council consideration on June 14th. And that's how we want to make sure that implementation of the OCP is incredibly robust. We are looking at, you know, different timelines for different types of reporting. So, annually, if you notice when you go through the draft OCP, there are dozens upon dozens of action items to complete. So annually, we envision a report back to council and the community to say, what's the status of those action items, right? Every 3 years, there might be a report speaking towards, different indicators in the community. And then every 5 years, when there's census data that's come out, that's where we'd be looking at more of a thorough evaluation and recommendations to council about what information have we received? What are the indicators showing us? Are tweaks and changes needed? So that implementation plan that intentionally is separate from the OCP. It's referenced in the OCP that we shall adhere to that implementation plan, but it's intentionally separate so that we can be adaptable, we can make changes as we need to, and that we can continue to have this be a living document going forward in the future.
Yeah, I'm happy that we have the broad strokes laid out in front of us, and that guideline is what we need. Relevance, it changes. We have a war in Ukraine, or we have a inflation crisis, or whatever. The world changes, and we want to make sure that we have the flexibility to adapt and be strong and be able to react positively. As long as this incorporates the broad strokes, I think that's the win. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Charlotte.
Yeah, thank you. This has been great. Watching this process from the start has been fascinating, especially with the hiccups and the challenges through COVID. I'm super grateful for all the people who've put so much time and effort into this work. It's a really important conversation to have as a community, and hearing so many people talk about the diversity as a strength, I think is something that our world is starting to learn. And I'm really proud to see one of our biggest processes be an exemplary situation of that process, of really listening and hearing what we all have to contribute to this community and what we need. I'm glad to hear about the documentation of the process. I know I've been trying to follow along as best I can and quizzing Paul occasionally about what's happening and how can we apply this to other processes already. I think at the time we're still learning. We're not quite there yet, but I do hope to see this come forward as a template for other projects, so that we don't need to think so hard and we can get in the habit. We can build that practice of learning how to listen to each other, even in the hard conversations. Because when outside influences do hit us, knowing what our values are as a community and where our goals lie, I think is going to help us come through that stronger than ever. I'm also looking forward to the implementation plan, because I think there's some really interesting opportunities, especially with technology, that we've all now learned how to use a lot more effectively, I think, together, to really build this into an actual living document through those reports and getting feedback, so that together we can collaborate on making movement on this, to make sure that we can implement some of these really great ideas for our community.
Okay, appreciate it. Councillor Ryan?
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, my screen is like over, my camera's here, my screen is here. So sorry if I look like I'm not looking at you. So yeah, of course, thank you so much to the volunteers. It's amazing how much work's been put into it. And it's really nice to hear such engaged members of the community speak so highly of the process. It's reassuring that the goal was achieved, and in making sure that so many different people were engaged. I did have a question about some of the focus group and the sessions that they had with staff and some of the consultants. Were those recorded and made available to the public at any point?
Ms. Leonard, any comments on that?
Sorry, hitting a lot of buttons here. We do have recorded meetings of the focus group. Not all of them were recorded. So I'll have to go back and check, but there were certain ones where we had we wanted to make sure the discussion was comfortable for the focus group members. And so I can go back and check and discuss with staff what the protocol would be for that.
Okay, yeah, I think my only feedback would be from my perspective and sort of chatting with the Social Development Committee about the OCP. It did seem like that educational piece, of course, there are members from the Social Development Committee that sat on the focus group. So, there are bases covered in that respect, but I did feel like there were some educational pieces that people wanted to know, you know, like what are the tools, what are our levers, and if that component of the sessions could have been recorded and then maybe the engagement piece kept separate, I think that would have been really useful for members of the community.
Great. Thanks, Councillor. I'll get back to you. Ms. McNabb, you've got your hand up, but you'd like to weigh in?
Yes, there were one or two workshops that were given to the focus group, but that were also separately done for the public.
Yeah.
There was a housing one that they were virtual, but I know the invitation for that went out publicly for.
Okay, perfect. I might have just missed that. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not sure how many of them went that way, but that one I know was, and it was offered 2 or 3 times.
And yeah, and I'm not sure if they were recorded, but if they weren't, making that available after would have been interesting too.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome though. Thanks.
Follow up, Councillor Ryan, anything else? Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Ollie.
One of the quandaries we dealt with at the start was the inadequacy of our bylaws. And the bylaws were initially said that we should address the bylaws first before we get to the OCP. Well, we now have an OCP and the bylaws are being updated, but when do you anticipate those to be complete?
Comment, Mr. Simon?
Through your worship, to Councillor Elliott. So one of the very unique things about this OCP is how action oriented it is. So you will see very direct, deliberate action items that are in there where they will be as specific as consider amendments to the zoning bylaw to accomplish X, Y, and Z to help support our housing. So the OCP is such a critical piece to provide that guidance to staff, that structured guidance, so that we're not doing something far out in left field and then moving something else along, so that we're focused and that we have a nice roadmap and a game plan. With respect to updating bylaws like the zoning bylaw and the DCC bylaw, those are items that are most certainly high on the priority list to get completed. Staff are anticipating review of the residential zones within the zoning bylaw towards the end of 2022 and into 2023. But most definitely, we know there's some updates that are needed.
Thank you.
All right, thank you all. So Ms. Learned, any final comments regarding OCP?
Thank you, Your Worship. I do have one, and it's how amazing Revelstoke is. I was mentioning to my husband, we had moved from Cochrane to Canmore, and I said, we should have kept going west. So I just really appreciate the dedication of the community members and the staff and the flexibility that they shown and demonstrated in a process like this. And definitely appreciate just council supporting this type of process. I think that's one of the most important elements of it, is the political will to hear from the community. And you've definitely demonstrated that. So and thank you. Thank you so much to everyone for their dedication to this and the passion for the community. Looking forward to see where it goes.
Great, thank you very much. Council, any final comments? Seeing none. Mr. Simon, that's anything you would like to add before we move on?
To Your Worship, just that I, again, would echo what Ms. Learned said, and really taken aback by how much local expertise we do have in the community. And I can tell you, professionally speaking, I am very, very confident that we have done everything we can to embed that local expertise within this plan. And we are very, very proud of the final document that's available in draft form now.
Thank you very much. Having read through most of it and definitely perused through all of it, but reading through in depth, it's a great read. It's not boring, and I appreciate what all of you done. Thank you again. So we're going to move on with our agenda and going into departmental updates. So Sergeant Chris Dodds, you have a fourth quarter operational update for us. You're muted, Sergeant. There we go.
All right, here I am. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Good afternoon, Your Worship and Council. Thanks for having me today to present the 2021 annual report or final report from the RCMP. I am currently the acting non-commissioned officer in charge here at Revelstoke Detachment, and I've been here for a couple of years. So I got a pretty good handle on the numbers, although somewhat COVID affected numbers over the last 2 years. So and that'll reflect in the numbers that I'm going to present as we go forward today. In 2021, we had approximately 3,500 calls for service for the RCMP detachment here. That's both municipal and provincial calls for service within our detachment policing area. I'll quickly run through the numbers there. We were down about 14% in 2021 over 2020. Our average, as you can see there, our 3-year average is up in the high 500s, close to 600. So calls for service in terms of mental health were about the same, slight increase there. Missing persons calls, just a slight increase. As we move down through the numbers, there's nothing too much change out of 2020. Coroner's Act did go down, and the sex assault calls did go down. Very few per capita, and in terms of calls for service here. Assaults were about the same, and 911 assistance, abandoned 911s. Check well-beings and calls for assistance, just general calls for assistance were obviously down 28%. So the Quarantine Act, which I added just to show we didn't have these calls pre-2020, but we had 39 Quarantine Act COVID Measures Act calls for service in 2021 and 18 in 2020. So we'll move on there. Property crime, we're definitely down in 2021 over 2020, about 21%. Our average is in about the 800s there. Break-in enters were slightly up, but not by too many. Motor vehicle theft up a little bit, but about pretty static there. The property, just overall property, you could see that we were down 26% in overall property calls for service. That's general theft, shoplifting, etc. So, moving on, other criminal code stuff, we were down 8%. Liquor Act, we were definitely down almost over 50%. That's due to our liquor establishments in town being either closed or under stricter measures with COVID measures. Drugs as well, we're lower by over 50% in terms of drug investigations. Moving on. Well, I guess we could talk about bylaws, but we're down. We didn't serve too many bylaw tickets in 21, but less than half than we did in the year previous. I see on my, I didn't notice till today, but my whatever version of this PowerPoint I sent, I was missing the municipal traffic numbers. So I do have them for you. The 2021 numbers are 23 total collisions versus 10 in 2020. And then zeros across the board, both in injury and fatal collisions within the municipal boundary. And you can see below our provincial traffic numbers outside the municipal boundary. We're looking at pretty close to our average there from last year, and but certainly creeping up over our 3-year average as traffic volumes get higher. And injuries on the provincial highways are exactly the same over the 2-year period. So luckily we didn't have any fatals last year, which is a nice thing to highlight. We didn't have any fatals last year in 2021. Impaired driving was up slightly, 33%, and that of course A lot of that is dependent on our investigators. They're out on the road and they're coming in contact with vehicles. So that number is a little bit, it's a stat, so it's always, it needs some explanation. I just wanted to mention overall traffic stats within the municipality. It's not a number I have quoted on my presentation, but just for your information, for council's information, is that combined both between ourselves, the detachment, and our highway patrol unit and the integrated road, our URSU unit that's based out of here. We wrote almost 1,800 tickets and warnings, violation tickets and warnings within the municipality last year in 2021. So pretty good amount of traffic contacts, as we call them, within the municipality. So 1,750 odd contacts within the municipality in a 1 year period there. So good work on both our member side and the highway patrol unit. Going down slightly, yeah, perfect. As I mentioned earlier, our total calls for service are just under 3,500 for 2021. 2020, we had 4,160 calls for service, and our 3-year average is just over 4,000. So, and I'm anticipating that those calls for service will creep back up into the 4,000 range for 2022. We've already seen in our first quarter stats from this year, we've already seen pretty much an increase across the board in most areas that we get calls for service in. Municipal calls for service, when you break it down between municipal and provincial, 2,130 in 2021 and so it's slightly down 17% over 2020, and the provincial calls for service were 1,362, down 13%. Certainly the amount of prisoners we put in the clink this last year was down as well by 43%, and our average is about 136. We take a lot of calls here at the office, so 4,630 calls in 2021, that's by telephone. And our average is about 5,300. We process, we have a lot of people come to the front counter as well. So we're looking at, over 2,200 front counter visits that our dedicated and diligent staff take at the front counter and help people out. Police information checks for volunteer and job related reasons. We were up in 2021, so that kept us busy. And we do our transcription hours were down slightly. Our liquor related, liquor licenses were certainly down. We didn't issue any in 2021 due to the restrictions. And SAR, I want to mention SAR. They do, our SAR calls here are one of the highest in the province. And so 35 police SAR calls last year. Our average is about 34. And I believe the SAR search and rescue group here takes upwards of 60, maybe even up to 80 calls per year total. So really busy SAR group that we support here as well. So quickly moving on, our 2022-23 annual performance planning is going to be the same as last year. I'm nothing earth-shattering here. We're going to keep working on impaired driving, traffic safety, speed enforcement within the municipality and the provincial roadway. Traffic safety, municipal enforcement. We really, as you could tell from those 1,800 odd or 1,750 odd tickets and warnings that we issued last year, we're really focusing on traffic enforcement within the municipal boundary, stop signs, school zones, cell phones, seat belts, stuff like that. So stuff that causes accidents. We'll keep on that this year. Theft from auto, and we do have that, especially around the Highway 1 corridor. We have theft from auto that does occur. So we're going to keep working at that, and prevention and reduction of assaults, just general persons assaults within the community. Couple of additions to the bottom there. We've recently filled our victim services position that was vacant that came vacant in December with Stephanie Melnick leaving. We've hired a new victim services person, and they have joined us from Prince Rupert, and she is just in her training right now, and we're hoping to have her fully into the position in the next month or two, once we cross a few hurdles. And then in terms of staffing for the RCMP detachment, we're always challenged with people moving in and moving out. Currently, we have 2 new recruits that we just received. I shouldn't call them recruits, but new members that we've received from Depot in Regina. So they're in their field training right now. And then we have 2 members that are coming to us from other detachments next month, which will bring our numbers up for sure. And then we'll be still working on some additional members that we're bringing in from other detachments, hopefully. One of our biggest hurdles, as you all know, is housing. I've had people, members that are more than willing to come, but the housing is a steep climb for them. So I am working in the background with E-Division to look at some options for housing. So that is one of my big priorities for this year. And then, of course, we're continuing with our community engagement processes with our local partners and resources. And we've had some great relationship building happening over the last year that I'm looking to continue into the 2022-23 fiscal year. And that is my report, Your Worship.
Thank you, Sergeant. Appreciate that. When we talk about thefts of vehicles and thefts from vehicles, my question is kind of the obvious: are the vehicles, are people leaving keys in their car, or are they leaving the cars open, that sort of thing, or is it people are breaking in by other means?
Yeah, Your Worship. So generally speaking, you hit the nail right on the head. It is opportunity crime. It's vehicles being left open, vehicle keys being left in the vehicle, valuables being left, out in plain view. And so those are generally the theft from vehicle calls that we do get, unfortunately. They can be prevented through public getting that information out, which we try to do in media spots, etc. But yeah, I definitely urge all the citizens and our visitors to make sure that out of sight, out of mind, and they secure their vehicle, because generally speaking, we don't have a lot of damage to the vehicles when there's a theft.
Great, well, appreciate that. Council, any questions for Sergeant Dodds? Councillor Elliott?
Just, Sergeant, just curious, on a community this size, is our crime, or how do we rate? Are we a pretty low-key crime area? Or, I mean, compared to a similar size city, 8,000 to 10,000 people?
Yeah, Your Worship, through Your Worship, but I don't know where we rank on the criminal code charges per capita at this particular moment, but I know we're not high, per capita. That's always a tough question to answer. Anything can happen at any time, but generally speaking, our calls for service and our violent crime obviously is low, and and we do our best to try and keep a handle on that, of course, and if it does happen, we obviously investigate it as best we can. But it's tough to say. I mean, I don't know the exact ranking we have currently on that spectrum.
No, I say it's great that you guys have presence, as probably the fact that open doors or keys in the ignition, or it follows with a safe community. And it's sort of what, as crime escalates, the security typically goes up as well. So maybe we're a victim of our own peacefulness. I don't know.
Maybe, yeah.
I just got one more question
Yeah,
on
sure.
the bylaws. You say you're enforcing some bylaw issues? That has me
Yes, your worship, through your worship. Yeah, yes, we do the odd bylaw enforcement, certainly when bylaw is not available. We have the authority to write bylaw tickets through the city and through the province. So we do issue the odd one, and but we generally leave that to the bylaw officers to deal with.
Noise, that sort of thing at night.
Yeah.
Councilor Palmer.
Thank you, Mayor Sulz. Thank you, Sergeant Dodds, for the presentation. I was noticed just generally on the statistics. So 2021 is down. Aside from all the those sort of small ones, which are can't really say much about statistical relevance on the real small numbers, but there's this general downturn in it. And I'm just trying to understand that, like 2020, we were COVID, 2021, we were COVID, but overall there's this dip. And if I was understanding you correctly, you're seeing already a trend this year that we're probably going to go back into sort of averages that we had over the years. Why is 21 down? Is it mostly COVID that's people just sort of holed up in their homes and didn't cause problems? Or I just curious, and maybe there isn't an answer.
Yeah, well, I mean, our stats, like we're definitely down in liquor act charges. So that's one example of where with the closures of many liquor establishments, we weren't seeing that kind of public intoxication, assaults in front of business, those nightclubs and stuff like that. So that's definitely evidence of the COVID restrictions that reduced our calls for service. I think speculating, of course, just the kind of less people coming to town to enjoy our town and scenery because of COVID restrictions, and I think that's one of the main things where we've seen a downturn in our calls for service and those types of calls for service. Some of the other ones are pretty close, but we're gonna like I say, we've already seen a bit of a creep up over last year's quarter. So we'll I mean, it's tough to say, to be honest.
Okay, yeah, well, thanks. Yeah, the number of people. Yeah, I was sort of seeing like the assistance abandoned 911 the well-being checks, but that's probably just volumes of people, and I'm guessing. Yeah. The other question I had, just regarding on opportunity crime, and I think Councillor Elliott sort of alluded to that. So I was even talking to a new resident on the block that I live on this, and he noted that I had skis in my carport. And he said, well, wouldn't be able to do that in Calgary. And I'm sure you would be quick to say that you shouldn't do that in Revelstoke either. And yet it is the lifestyle that we have in the sort of the neighbors. Probably the biggest deterrent in my neighborhood is every one of us knows in our block, everybody knows everybody. And so I no real sort of, I guess there's a part of me that is willing to, well, I wonder about that lifestyle that you say, you know what, we are a place that I don't have to be paranoid that I left a power tool in my carport when I go in for lunch, kind of thing. And I guess I'm just kind of rambling, but it's a quality of life that people that move here are saying, oh, that's really cool that you could not lock up your skis. And I said, yeah, I mean, it's an opportunity at the same time, so it's a risk. I'm not really saying anything other than that conflict, I guess, that exists. And probably, because as soon as there's one theft on our street, then everybody's going to lock up everything, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Thanks for the comment. Anyone else? Councillor Sherman.
A quick word on that. It's
I've spoken with a few people about it because, like you say, it's part of the lifestyle, it's part of the social contract of living in this community, and in a lot of communities, I think. It's just, I won't steal your stuff, you don't steal my stuff. I remember, I think you'd commented on my leaving my bicycle unlocked downtown at one point. And we were having a committee meeting in Grizzly Plaza, and I left my bicycle and my purse unattended. While I was on the block and wandering around, I saw people wandering by, and I enjoy that we can have that social contract here. And if there's ever any ideas or thoughts on working with the RCMP on strengthening that social contract, because as much as we are all better off if we would lock things up better and take away that opportunity, but at the same time, it is part of why we love living here, that we are comfortable and safer. I think at the time I acknowledged, like, yeah, one of these days I'm going to come back and the bike will be gone, and I'm going to be mad at myself, like, oh, I finally didn't get away with it. But so far I seem to do okay, and I try to make sure I lock it up in certain circumstances. But I think it is an important thing for the community to celebrate and really reaffirm with each other that there are things that we do that are not necessarily in the law or the written law, but it's part of our social contract of being good neighbors, and trying to make sure we celebrate that properly and affirm it.
Can I?
Councillor,
I think your police presence, visibility is important. I've seen guys downtown on their bikes, or I see them out on the corner there at the main intersection. So keeping the police visible is an important element in part of our safe emotion that we're comfortable with, right? So carry on with what the path you're on, Chris. That's what.
Yeah, Your Worship, if you don't mind, visibility is really obviously a big part of policing. We need to be out and about. We need to be on our feet or on the bikes or in the cars and in the communities and doing patrols. And that's a big one of the things that I stress quite often here, to make sure that we are out and about and visible and approachable as well to the public. So it's really important for me to make sure that we're out there, we're public servants, and we're visible.
Great. All right. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Sergeant Dodds. We're now going to move on to communications, the fire department first quarter reports. Chief DeRosa.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and Council. I have presented you with my report in your package there, and if you have any questions or if you'd like me to highlight anything, I'd be happy to do so.
Any comments, Council? Is there anything that you feel that we should highlight? I guess one of the things that I'm impressed with your department, Chief, is making sure that everyone from a mental health aspect is taken care of after we see some of the tragedies and the fires and whatnot in the community. And I just wanted to highlight from my perspective and working with your group and seeing that. And I see that that's a positive. But, we recently had a house fire. All kinds of things can happen in the community. Is there anything, as we kind of go into the drier seasons, that you want to highlight for residents regarding what they do at home and how they keep things outside or against their house or anything like that?
Through Your Worship, there's so many things that I would love to be able to impart upon the community, just for fire safety, things that I've seen in my lifetime and in my profession. And so one of the things is just to be aware of your surroundings and how just the simplest, smallest thing can become a catastrophe so easily. That home fire escape planning is really, really important to plan an escape. Our recent house fire, as you mentioned, the family was able to escape with their pets, so that was absolutely fantastic. Took a huge load off of my shoulders for that component of it. Checking your smoke alarms, testing your smoke alarms and carbon monoxide alarms regularly to make sure that they are actually functioning. Smoke alarms have a 10-year lifespan, and after 10 years, they need to be replaced. Something that is new for many homes that might be useful is a 10-year lifespan smoke alarm with a full 10-year battery. So you never have to change the battery, you just need to test it, make sure it's working. As far as wildfire season is coming up, we're not sure what it's going to look like this year. However, we're anticipating that it is going to be an active one. So we're preparing, we've got a couple of our career firefighters are going to Salmon Arm to the BC Fire Training Officers Association seminar, and they're taking Wildfire Fighter Train the Trainer, so we can do more professional level in-house training here for all of our members, including the volunteers. So we are working on being prepared for the summer, and we're just hoping that everyone is safe.
Great, thank you for that. Council, any comments or questions for Chief Tarose?
So, as part of the fire department's equipment list, we've got a fire truck that's quite mobile for the flats, right? Like four-wheel drive. Is that right? It was part of the CSRD amalgamation issue that we faced earlier on.
So, Your Worship, there is an ATV type of vehicle. It's a John Deere Gator style with a portable pump and a small water tank on it. It does have capabilities for firefighting foam as well. So that was the one that was acquired in conjunction or a partnership with the CSRD. I believe that was in 2020. So yeah, it was specifically as part of the response planning for the flats and grass fires and that sort of thing that could occur out there.
Yeah, sort of the interface, the urban-rural interface. It makes us mobile and allows us, the fire department to get into some awkward spots. So that's great.
All right, anything else? Seeing nothing else, Chief Tarose, I want to thank you. Thank you for your report. Thanks for what you're doing with our fire department and keeping us all safe. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Have a great day.
Great, thank you so much. All right, Council, we're at the end of our agenda, so I'm going to call for a motion to terminate the meeting. Councillor Ryan, seconded by Councillor Palmer. All in favor? Motion's carried. This committee of the whole meeting is terminated. Thank you. Thank you, staff.